All right, today we're going to continue on with our physical development stuff, and we're going to talk about the actual act of childbirth. Well, pregnancy or childbirth, conception, development through prenatal development. That's the big word, isn't it? Yeah, prenatal development. Here you go. So, what's it like to find out that you're pregnant? Well, I don't know. I've never been pregnant, but I can tell you my side of the story. Um, my wife and I can still remember with our first child, we've been trying to have a kid for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months, something like that, and it didn't feel real. It didn't feel like it was actually a possibility. It didn't feel like I could ever possibly be a father. And I can still remember I was up at Stony Brook University there, and we went to the campus health center to check and find out if my wife was pregnant. And we didn't really believe it. I'm not even sure why we went in. We didn't actually believe it. And they came back with a positive test result, and it was like, wow. I mean, but we had been trying, right? So that was the point, but still, it was just amazing what went through my mind at the time. Now, little did I know what I was actually signing up for, and boy, we'll talk about that for the rest of the course. But it was an amazing thing how my very definition of who I was changed in that instant. Okay, well, let's talk about what actually happened there. All right. Prenatal development. Pre is before, natal is baby. Before the baby, development of the organism before its birth. Right. Natal is birth. I just said baby. All right, sue me. I'm not so hard at Latin. All right. Begins at conception. Blah blah blah. Let me go through and show you. When baby girls are born, by the way, they're born with in their ovary is all these eggs that they're going to have, and a baby girl is born with as many eggs as they're ever going to produce. It's there, and what happens is as the baby girl gets older, we'll talk about menstruation and whatnot. But what happens is that the girl's eggs mature approximately once a month, every 28 days. That's the menstrual cycle, and one egg matures and travels. Now, every 28 days, one egg matures and travels down. And so what happens now? Okay, let me try to get the story. Let me see. Here it is. Here's a bigger picture. Okay, an egg matures and is released by the ovary, and it travels down the fallopian tube. It travels down the fallopian tube. Now, many times what happens is that egg travels down the fallopian tube and it does not meet a partner on the way. A partner, by that I mean sperm. Okay? If an egg does not meet a sperm along the way, it gets flushed out. A woman's period is literally the body is building up nutrients to get ready for a fertilized egg, which we'll describe here. If no fertilized egg implants at this process here, the woman's body flushes everything out, all of the inner linings of the uterus, all goes flush. Let's reflush, let's reset, let's retry the whole system next month. Okay? Well, since this is child psych class, it's not period class. Let's talk about a normal one. So now an egg is released, goes out. At some point, make naughty, and what's going to happen is as the egg travels along, it's going to meet a sperm cell. Oh, look at that. The little sperm goes in there and become a fertilized egg. And this fertilized egg is going to begin to divide. Remember we talked about meiosis and mitosis. Well, it's going to split by mitosis. And that single fertilized cell, remember the deal. Gametes, remember that? Sperm is a gamete, and an egg is a gamete, and each only has 23 total chromosomes. Boom! Put them together, you now got 46. And in fact, there's this one, since I'm on to that little phrase, it turns out that As soon as this one sperm, which has 23 chromosomes, enters this one egg, which has 23 chromosomes, this egg will then put out a protective barrier to prevent any other sperm from getting in. Because if another sperm got in, you'd be up to what, 23, 46, 69 different chromosomes? That ain't a good thing, okay? So to ensure that only 46 chromosomes get in there. So now it's a fertilized cell with 46 chromosomes. Through the process of mitosis, it splits. And then the first two cells, exactly the same. Then 4 cells, exactly the same. And mitosis goes along, 8 cells, exactly the same. 16 cells, exactly the same. 32 cells, exactly the same. Now, these cells, which are literally clones of each other, traveling down there, it's dividing as it comes along. In an ideal world, this zygote is going to implant on the uterine wall. But just because it comes down here as a fertilized egg, a variety of things can happen. If there's a chromosomal abnormality, often the woman's body will reject this fertilized egg and it'll flush out as though it had never been fertilized. Even in some cases where it's a fertilized egg and there's no chromosomal abnormality, and it still might get flushed out, okay? So in an ideal world, as we said, it gets fertilized. And what can also happen is along the way, this fertilized egg can implant on the wall of the fallopian tube. Now that is really going to suck to have a cell which starts to divide itself in your fallopian tube. That's called an ectopic pregnancy. Can lead to massive infections, if not death, okay? So again, in an ideal world, it gets fertilized, it travels along, and it implants itself, okay? So this is the basic process that we're going to talk about, that travel. But now let's go back and talk about this stuff. Conception, to ensure that the correct number of chromosomes from the father are joined to the mother's chromosomes. A chemical reaction seals the ovum's outer membrane after penetration by a single sperm cell. Emergency contraception, like the RU86. I don't know. I don't remember. I'm too old for that stuff. But I think it was RU86. It can work to stop ovulation from occurring so that the egg isn't released, or it might slow down the sperm. That's a different. That would be like a spermicide or something. But more importantly, RU86 in particular is one that seems to prevent the fertilized egg from implanting in the first place. From implanting. That is to say, in so many cases, as we said, the fertilized egg comes down and it's supposed to implant. Sometimes it does not, and it comes out because either the mother's body rejects it because of, say, chromosomal abnormalities, but sometimes it just doesn't implant. RU486 almost guarees that this process will not happen. Even if it is a fertilized egg, there are no chromosomal abnormalities. RU86, RU4, whatever it is, will almost completely assure that it goes out, which many would equate to an abortion, okay? Because they say there's a fertilized egg here. This is not the same as contraception that prevents ovulation or contraception that slows down a sperm or something like that, because that's contraception which is ensuring that egg doesn't meet sperm, fertilization doesn't happen. But it's a completely different brand of contraception. Here you have a fertilized egg, and depending on your arguments about abortion, some would argue life began. Later on, some other people might argue life begins when the heart beats. Life begins when it's somewhat of an academic question. So there are the two types of birth control. Birth control that prevents the fertilization from occurring in the first place, and birth control that prevents the implantation. One is more controversial than the other, but of course they both have their issues. We go through the embryonic stage, the fetal stage, the zygote. What am I trying to say? As the egg matures, or as the infant matures, it originally is called the zygote. Later on, it's going to be called an embryo, and then even later, it's going to be called a fetus. So that's the three main stages: zygote, embryo, and fetus. So now, what is the difference? Okay, what is it? Again, when does it stop being called a zygote and start becoming called an embryo? Usually at the point of implantation. As it's traveling, it's a zygote, embryo. When does the embryo stop being an embryo, start being called a fetus? Kind of arbitrary, but usually at the point that the heart begins to beat. Okay? So those are usually the breaking points, implantation and heartbeat. Feel free. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, here. This is good. So now as we said, that cell was traveling, and the fertilized cell became 2, 4, 8, 16. Same. Then some magic happens, okay? Is it a touch of God? I don't know. Is it epigenetics? Maybe. Maybe that's from our last chapter where this is going to come in. But something happens to those cells, even though there's 64 cells, or around, at this point, around 64 cells, they're literally exactly the same. Some magic happens. Bing! Buddy, you go up and become a brain. Bing! Buddy, you go down and become a kidney. Boom! You're going to be a liver. Wait a minute. Just a moment ago, they were exactly the same. And now you're saying that one's going to go become a kidney, and that's going to become a liver, and that's going to become a brain? Dude, 1 minute ago, they were exactly the same. Yeah, something happened. Okay? Differentiation is a process that occurs during cell division in which each new cell, as it divides, is committed to becoming a particular structure and serving a particular function. As this zygote is developing, it's going to come into 2 different layers, the trophoblast and the blastocyst. The outer layer of the zygote will become the placenta, the umbilical cord, the amniotic sac, the support structures that are going to hold the baby. The inner layer of the zygote is going to become the actual baby. Okay. The embryonic stage is the second stage, right, when it's an embryo. Usually it's about weeks 3 through 8, like I said, after implantation and before the heart starts beating. And in fact, it is this stage that is in many ways the most critical, because it is at this stage that the actual organs are developing. Okay? Later on, we're going to talk about teratogens and other environmental problems. And granted, I mean, you never want to have a mother that's smoking crack or something. But when this stuff happens, this is the worst time. I mean, this is the most crucial time. Okay? If major genetic problems exist, women are going to miscarry. And again, you know, like I said, many of these fertilized eggs, these zygotes that come in, don't attach to the uterine wall, and it's nature's way of saying, hey, this shouldn't have happened. The majority of miscarriages, though some miscarriages are the result of bad environmental things, like a woman's fall or something like that. But the majority of miscarriages are, and I've seen through miscarriage. I've seen what women go through. I can't imagine, but I've seen, and it's horrible. But by far the majority of the time when miscarriages occur, it's really a blessing you didn't know about, because this is the body's way of saying, hey, there was something wrong here. This was not a viable child. This was not something that was going to be happening. And so most miscarriages, not all, but most occur in that way. Okay. The umbilical cord, yeah. The blastocyst, remember that was the inner layer of cells. The trophoblast was the outer layer, became the support structures and stuff. The inner layer of cells, the blastocyst, will further develop into 3 different layers: the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. Middle, inner, outer. Okay? And so the ectoderm will give rise to the nervous system. The mesoderm will become the circulatory, excretory, etc. And the endoderm will become the skin outside stuff. Okay? So the embryo develops into layers. It elongates and forms a neural tube. It folds on itself, and it becomes the basis of the nervous system, the spinal cord. By week 4, the eyes are forming, the heart begins to flutter, By week 8, arms are developed and the legs are beginning. Okay, yeah, so we're starting to see some movements in here. We refer to these two types of growth or developmental patterns, the cephalocaudal pattern, which is particularly evident in these infants. In fact, here, let me show you cephalocaudal and proximal distal. Here is, this is the ideal, or the ultimate. Cephalocaudal pattern is, I mean, look at how big the head is compared to the rest of the body. Cephalocaudal, the head develops first. And proximal and distal, look at how short the arms are compared to the rest of the body. So, proximal distal means that the center develops faster than the outside, and cephalocaudal means that the top develops faster than the bottom. But anyway, here's an interesting image. I didn't talk about it a minute ago, but here it is. Very interesting. Look at this. This is a human infant as it's developing. At some point it has tail. At some point in here it has gills. Yeah, a little baby fish going on in there. It's got gills. All kinds of freaky stuff. You couldn't hardly tell the difference between any of these embryos at this point. It's a shark and a salamander and an opossum. Don't get me started on evolution, okay? All right. Organogenesis. I want to talk about this here for a second. Organogenesis, that's just a word for that time when the organ systems form. Genesis means, birth or start or something like that. And so the birth or start of the organs. Usually by the 8th week, organogenesis is done, and that's when really the heart begins to beat, really. At the end of 8 weeks, you can see everything is in place. They don't run yet, right? Mama's still running the show. But they're there. By the end of 8 weeks, there's a heart, there's a kidney, there's a liver. It's all in there. That's what organogenesis refers to as this time when poof. Now, as I had already said, there are these things called critical periods, segments of time during which structures are first forming and are most vulnerable to damage. As a general rule, the most critical time is during organogenesis, but that's not completely true. We find that, say for example, if mothers, the details are a little off on here, but if a pregnant mother gets a virus, certain cold viruses during the second trimester, which is after this, then the baby is much more prone to developing schizophrenia later in life. So, I mean, clearly, when I say critical periods, there's a lot of critical periods for different issues. Like I said, for schizophrenia, it's a different time frame. But organogenesis is obviously, I mean, if you're talking about a developing fetus, this is the big one, right? Because without this, you ain't got a baby. So this is the biggest critical period of all, but there are other critical periods depending on exactly which issue you're talking about. And in fact, we're going to come back later to this word critical periods, slightly different use, but later on we're going to talk about, say, language develops during critical periods, which is to say the baby's ready during certain times and less ready during others. Same ideas. The third and final stage, the fetal stage, goes from 8 weeks until about birth, obviously the longest stage. The organs completely run at this point. Clearly, at the end of the embryonic stage, your embryo, now becoming a fetus, is tiny. I mean, minuscule. I don't even, tiny little thing. And it's at this point, obviously, that it becomes a full baby. So actual size develops here. Tissues and organs further differentiate, become functional. The arms and the legs begin to move. Here's a ultrasound scan, an early one. This is 6 weeks old, and you couldn't tell exactly at this point what it was. This is my daughter, by the way, and you couldn't tell what it was. You couldn't tell, is it a boy, is it a girl? I don't know. It's a thing. It's a blob. Wow, I'm gonna have a blob. That's just what I always wanted. No, all right, whatever. But they take the picture and you take it home and you post it on the wall. In fact, as I'm looking at it, it kind of makes me think it's an octopus in there or something. But if memory serves, this was about 1.4 centimeters long. So that's 3/4 of an inch. Okay, yeah, 1.4 centimeters, 3/4 of an inch. Here's a couple of images. I don't have any idea how they do this, but take a look at this. We've got the alien baby, but clearly we've got the cephalocaudal pattern where the top develops faster than the bottom, and the proximal distal pattern where those things at the center of the body develop faster than those at the ends of the body. So we can clearly see that pattern developing here. But you can see some, all of I mean, even here at 8 weeks old, you can see it's identifiable, though it is freaky looking alien kid, but still, you can see all of the stuff. By 16 weeks old, see, now this is what I always find very strange. Even at 16 weeks old already, look at this. This fetus is already pushing the edge of the amniotic sac. Right, yeah, the amniotic sac. It's already pushing it, and it's 16 weeks. It's not even halfway cooked, and the thing is already, all right? Don't put any more yeast in there. That dude is done. All right. Look at how this baby's already getting all cramped up in here, and it's only half finished. Okay. All right. The sex of the mother can be determined. Sex of the mother. Now that's funny. The sex of the baby can be determined at some point around 17 to 20 weeks. The mother can feel the movement of the fetus, and it becomes a very important event in a mother's life. Again, I mean, talking out of class, but I can remember one of those where my first baby, was very clear. My second one was a little less discriminating, but my first baby loved orange juice. At least that's what my wife thought. She wasn't her. It wasn't her that wanted the orange juice. It was the baby that wanted the orange juice. And whenever she would drink orange juice, that baby would just start kicking. And I can still remember one time, she wakes me up at maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and she's like, "Oh my God, I haven't felt the baby in hours and hours and hours. Oh, is there something wrong?" And so I had to jump out of my car, 2 in the morning, run to the grocery store, buy the orange juice, get it back home. She just gloves down the orange juice and she's like, come on. And 2 minutes later, boo, the kid's all like going crazy in there. I was like, okay, cool, juice did the job, right? It was a big deal for her though. That was her signal. That was her signal that everything was okay. I mean, to her, that's the thing that made her believe that everything was okay. You can begin to hear the heartbeat even with a stethoscope. It was a lot earlier than this. You could hear a heartbeat if you put on a fetal monitor. I don't know how to describe it, but it's an amplifier. They amplify, boom, 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 boom. And you can hear that way earlier than this point, but I can remember that. 26 to 28 weeks, the lungs are starting to mature for successful breathing. I want to say around 26 weeks is... 24 to 26 weeks is the bare minimum. The minimum age that a baby can be born and even possibly have a chance at survival. You'd still need a respirator and you need all kinds of other stuff, but at least a kid could breathe, could physically live around 24 to 26 weeks. But before that, it just isn't going to work no matter what you got. Here I've got an 18-week fetus picture, and this one is This is one where they could determine it was a girl, and it's very simple. You know how they determine if it's a boy or a girl, right? It's like, they just look for the winky. Winky, yes, boy. Winky, no, girl. I don't know how much easier than that. I mean, that's an amazing thing because that's how we figured out the sex of the pigs on the farm, right? It's the same thing. Is there one? Yes or no? Right? It's that simple. There we got our 24 and 30-week fetus. As we said, that 24 is about the earliest you could possibly get at it. You see that the kid is covered in vernix, that kind of hairy, skinny kind of thing that covers the whole body. Towards the end, the fetus grows from about 2 pounds to about 5 pounds, and the organ systems not just exist and function, but become strong. In other words, they have the ability to function without the mother's help. The brain at this point is developing very, very rapidly. And yes, at this point, nature and nurture are taking hold, And yes, mothers, if you read to that baby while in their womb, they obviously have no idea what you're reading to them. However, they do respond to different sounds, and so though there was some research not too long ago, the Beethoven effect. You play Beethoven for your baby, and your baby becomes a genius. Whatever. But it definitely helps your baby to have these types of different environmental stimulants even before birth. Okay. The average newborn is 7.5 pounds and 21 inches long. Here's a 36-week-old fetus, and here's a 37 to 42. Not just this is not just a hypothetical one, this is a real one, mine. Right? And now y'all are supposed to go, oh, that's so sweet. Okay. And so they're born. Here's birth certificates. Yeah, I don't know why I have those up there. I'm proud of my kids. That's why they're up there. What do you mean not? All right, whatever. So, where were they born? At the University Hospital in Stony Brook. Where was she born? At the St. John's Hospital in Springfield, Missouri. Doesn't say it on there, does it? No, that one. Whatever. Okay. So now the baby's being, developing in there. We can talk about nature and nurture. Well, it turns out that even in mama's belly, that's nature. There's environmental influences. Granted, the mother's belly does provide a lot of insulation from harm in the environment, but it does not protect it from all harm in the environment. In particular, if the mama ingests any kind of funkiness or others. A teratogen is any substance or condition that might disrupt prenatal development and cause birth defects. Okay? Substances, I guess conditions, there's some rumors, I don't know the truth of it, maybe yes, maybe no, it's still up for the debate, that too much Wi-Fi signals running through the developing baby's brain can trigger autism in children. That's a belief system some have. Some think that having, if you're pregnant and you're too close to the electrical wires, or particularly the electrical transmission stations or something, that can disrupt the development of the brain. Maybe yes, maybe no. But from a traditional perspective, teratogens usually refer to chemicals. Okay? Chemicals usually that are ingested by the mother or inhaled, I guess, if it's pollution in the environment or something, but usually things that are ingested by the mother. Prematurity refers to babies who are born earlier or smaller than they should be. Prematurity is a bit of a big deal. It's not the prematurity per se that is a problem. It is the fact that most infants that are born premature are actually born low birth weight. Low birth weight is a baby that is born less than 5.5 pounds at birth, which is about 2 pounds less than average. And what happens is children that are born with low birth weight have problems. Low birth weight correlates with problems throughout the lifespan, whether they be learning problems or physical problems or emotional problems. But it's a correlation. It's a correlation. We talked about correlation. Remember, correlation does not imply causation. I'm not saying low birth weight causes these problems, but we're going to find that situations which may well cause low birth weight, such as poor nutrition by the mother or no access to vitamins or things like this, that the factors which made the low birth weight in the first place may well help to explain problems later in life, including, to keep it simple, let's say women that are born in poverty are less likely to have adequate nutrition during pregnancy, are more likely to have low birth weight children, and therefore if they were in poverty while they were pregnant, chances are they're going to be in poverty they'll be more likely to be in poverty later on as well. So I'm not saying that I think that a major part of low birth weight is in fact physical, that yes, it does have physical problems, but also those conditions which created the low birth weight in the first place also become problems for other things. Some of the more common teratogens include alcohol, cocaine, cigarette smoke, marijuana, heroin, but it also can include mercury or lead, all kinds of different electromagnetic radiation. I can still remember every time I go into the dentist's office, there's always a sign, if you're pregnant or think you may become pregnant, then blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, I don't think I'm going to be pregnant, all right? I decided I was done with that. So there's clearly something there, but it also can include things like herpes or chickenpox or syphilis, okay? Or rubella is a big nasty one, by the way. Oh my, you do not want to get German measles when you're pregnant. Other conditions, however, that are also teratogens in some ways. It's not exactly a teratogen by the definition, but it also could be stress and age, okay? Women under stress while they're pregnant. In fact, there has been some studies showing, in fact, this is really weird, but women that are under a lot of stress during pregnancy, their infant boys are much more likely to become homosexual. I don't know what that is, but that's a correlational finding. But it also can create low birth weight and other problems. And same thing with age. We're going to talk about age a little bit. The father's not completely free on this stuff because we already talked about the effect of behaviors that we exhibit on our epigenome, and how the epigenome can also be translated to an infant. So fathers are definitely not out of it. However, in more the teratogenic sense, fathers' behaviors can affect their sperm. Fetal alcohol syndrome is the syndrome where if a woman drinks alcohol to excess during pregnancy, it can cause birth defects, growth deficiencies, head formations, and not just these physical problems, but creates severe cognitive and emotional problems as well. However, in recent years, they've kind of added a new word to our dialect, fetal alcohol effects, and this is this idea that fetal alcohol, it's one of these things where, does this kid have fetal alcohol syndrome? I don't know. I mean, to diagnose something, let's say they have to have 12 symptoms. Well, this kid has 10. Well, clearly this kid's got problems, but he doesn't have 12, so he doesn't qualify for fetal alcohol syndrome. So he only has 10 of them. Well, clearly he's showing some effects of. And so this word, this concept of fetal alcohol syndrome it's interesting. It's important to understand, but it implies that the effects of alcohol are a yes or a no. Either yes, it did affect the kid, or no, it didn't. This concept here, however, fetal alcohol effects, implies that there is really no safe amount of alcohol for a woman to have, and so a woman may have some drinks during pregnancy, not enough to create this scenario, but yet enough to have something, okay? Individual or multiple birth defects caused by prenatal exposure to alcohol, lowered IQ, hyperactivity, growth deficiencies, and physical malformations can exist, but not to the degree that it indicates fetal alcohol syndrome. But we find that children with fetal alcohol syndrome, they have different physically their faces are different, their characteristics are different. But more importantly than that, here's a brain, a somewhat normal brain. Look at all the wrinkles in there, the fissures and the sulci and the sulci and the whatevers. But you see, all of these ridges means that there's extra surface area to this brain in there. Each time there's a little valley, there's all surface area inside of there. Here's a brain of a kid with fetal alcohol syndrome, much smoother. It's almost completely smooth. In other words, the total amount of cerebral cortex is very small. And when it comes to what makes you smart, it's the cerebral cortex. This kid's got literally half a cerebral cortex, right? Because it's smooth, there's just nothing there. I mean, it's totally different. It's not just this, it's this, okay? That's some major stuff. 1 out of every 100 pregnant women report using cocaine. Yeah, social desirability. Remember we talked about surveys and you want to find the truth, and here in science our job is to find the truth. And you ask somebody, yeah, did you take cocaine while you're pregnant? No, hell no, says the woman that's high at the moment, right? Nobody admits that stuff. Well, 6.3% of privately insured patients and 26.9% of Medicaid or underinsured babies test positive for cocaine when they're born. This is a frightening, frightening thing. I suspect, though I have not done my homework completely, I suspect this does not necessarily imply that 27% of Medicaid mothers are, snorting coke, but I suspect that they are exposed to situations where the cocaine is being absorbed by their bodies in unintentional ways, okay, just because of the environment that they're in, even if they themselves aren't snorting them. But clearly, cocaine can retard growth, preterm births, all kinds of problems later on with, same thing with like crack babies. Huge problems with self-control. They just can't sit. There's hyperactivity and things of this nature as well. Approximately 10 to 15% of women report smoking. Report, not necessarily true. Though this rate bases quite considerably based on race. Lots of bad chemicals, but there's a couple of other side effects to smoking. Number one, women that smoke during pregnancy, women that smoke tend to eat less and tend to gain less weight. And it's kind of important that women gain weight during pregnancy. But also it reduces the supply of oxygen available to the fetus, and that's a problem because, of course, in order for your cells to function, they need oxygen. That's just part of what, in order to fire anything, you need oxygen. And so the most common effect is low birth weight, and as we already said, the problems associated with low birth weight are pretty broad, and so the problems with cigarette smoking are multiplied with this being another thing. And again, these children born in this scenario are more likely to have shorter attention spans, lower reading scores, spelling scores, math scores, all kinds of different things. Viruses can get in to the developing baby, or mothers that have, say, STDs or something can transfer these diseases during birth. And so sometimes a C-section, a cesarean section is performed where you can remove the baby through an incision in the stomach to prevent contact with any STDs that might be present. Same deal with syphilis. All kinds of funky things can happen. And again, the syphilis virus can, in fact, attack the baby through the placenta. HIV can also be transmitted from mother to infant. And in fact, it is during birth that it is the most likely to happen. Breastfeeding can make it even worse, even higher rate rather. So there are different things that you can take, medicines you can take that can reduce this risk, but clearly you do not want to have a baby born with that. 28% of all first births are to teenage mothers under the age of 18. Wow, that's a crazy number. Feels high, but what do I know? Again, there are racial differences here in who's having what kinds of babies at what ages. And so babies born with a low birth weight are much more likely when the kids are younger, right? Younger babies here, percent of newborns with a low birth weight. And if the mother is under the age of 15, look at the low birth weight problems, okay? And if the mother is over 40, look at the low birth weight problems for different reasons. Immaturity, the mother's body is just not fully capable of doing what it needs to do. Here we go. Teenage mothers are somewhat of a problem because often there's low income, poor education, other possible uses of drugs and stuff. bad prenatal care, especially at the early times. Uh, yeah, okay. Birth for mothers over 35 has definitely increased, and there are problems with that as well. In particular, older mothers have an increased risk of having children with Down syndrome. Here's this notion, now that once what am I trying to say? Once the zygote has, once the zygote has implanted into the uterine wall, if this is implantation, the first 3 weeks there's not a huge risk for, what am I trying to say? The birth defect, increasing risk of birth defects. Right, this is that critical period we had talked about. During this organogenesis, between 3 weeks after implantation and 8 weeks after implantation, this is where if you're going to go out and go partying, this is the worst time to do it. The problem is that it is definitely possible to be pregnant up at this point and not exactly realize it, especially if you're a new mother or if you're a young girl who's not particularly paying attention. I mean, a young girl who's 14 years old and is pregnant hasn't hardly had any periods, and so she's not completely understanding what normal is yet, because she hasn't had enough experiences with what is normal feelings in this cycle. And so she might not even know she's pregnant until somewhere up in here, and so she hasn't modified her behaviors accordingly. And this is the point where the worst problems occur. Sperm, alcohol by father can have problems. Yeah, right, whatever. Fathers play a role in this, but at this point, it's not quite the same. Stages of birth. There's, nobody's exactly positive what is it that makes a baby's or mama's go into labor. But I'll tell you, this is an interesting thing because, when we go to the doctor, how did they do it? I think they did it, I believe this is how they calculated it. They say a full pregnancy is 40 weeks. Then what they do is the day they calculate your last period. You say, oh, my last period was, and then they take 2 weeks after that, and they assume that's when fertilization occurred, 2 weeks after your last period. And so to calculate the birth date, the due date, they go basically 42 weeks after your last period, which is what they believe is 40 weeks after. So anyway, I can still remember we hit our 40 weeks, or we hit our due date. And the doctor said, wait, how long? A week, and then come in. We come in a week late. And he says, you're looking okay. Come back. How long? 3 more days. We kept going back. Oh my God, we went back every day after that. And finally we were, let's see now, what is it? 13 days past the 2 day. And the doctor says, okay, we're going to induce it now. Okay, we're going to induce this thing. So we went into the hospital and we had a scheduled birth. They put her, we came in on a Sunday afternoon. They put us up at the hospital. This was out in Stony Brook, and gave her Pitocin, if memory serves, which is a chemical to start the process. But even with Pitocin, that baby did not want to come out. All right. So clearly that baby's brain did not prompt the hormonal changes in the mama. And so it was bad. So anyway, it's these hormonal changes which are triggered by the baby's chemicals in the baby's brain, which causes the uterine muscles to contract, and these contractions create hormones which feed back and increase the contractions. The cervix is the opening. The opening between the vagina and the uterus, and the cervix is normally like what, 1,000th of a centimeter open or something. It's very tiny. It's just a little pinhole. And I'm telling you, you would just never believe how important a centimeter could possibly be, and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting, and your wife is in labor and labor and labor, and it's 14 hours since they started the Pitocin. And you're like, okay, isn't she dilated? And I'm like, well, she's been having contractions for 14 hours, right? Oh yeah, she dilated 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter? Yeah, that's it. A baby's gonna come out dead? I don't think so, buddy. And it did speed up, thank God. If we had 1 centimeter in 14 hours, we'd be on a hell of a long one. Well, it took a long time for us, but eventually it got to 10 centimeters. It took us, let's say, it took us about 24 hours to go from, Pitocin to 10 centimeters dilated. But it gradually opens up to allow the baby to come out. In the second stage of birth, the delivery stage, after that dilation has occurred, the baby actually starts to move out through the birth canal much faster. Although I must be completely honest, I lost track of time during this stage because this is where the emotions were just nuts. I mean, it was bad, of course, during all of those hours of dilation, but it was just, I don't know what the hell was going on at this point, okay? It was just nutso. And so the contractions push the baby out to the birth canal, the mother pushes, and sometimes, and this is a very important rule for you ladies. If you got a doctor and your doctor says stop pushing, okay? I'm just telling you. You will regret it like hell if you don't listen to that doctor when he says stop. And I know that it is just instinctive to push that baby out at that point. But if the doctor says stop, you stop. There's a reason for it. The third and final stage is the afterbirth stage, where the placenta and the other membranes and the other support structure gets expelled out. There's still contractions, but the contractions have lessened, and it's really a comparison thing. I mean, you just shove this out, so all of a sudden sending out this little bag of stuff ain't no big deal, right? So, and not only that, but you're all distracted. You're distracted by this new thing, right? This new baby. So you're preoccupied, and so the afterbirth stage. In fact, with both of my children, nothing. I don't remember it. My wife doesn't remember it. It happened so quickly and automatically. It just didn't seem important at the time. Most babies are in fact born in the hospital. Not a surprise. Nowadays they try to make them as comfortable as possible. The rooms for giving birth are actually fairly nice. We had private rooms and stuff. It's a very, very nice process. They try to make it natural and comfortable and everything else. Birth is treated as a normal life event rather than a medical condition. Thank God the insurance company didn't treat it that way. They call it a medical condition, or I would have been in some serious trouble. But they definitely wanted me to be there with her during the whole event, to hold her hand. The whole day and a half, and it's designed for that. They definitely do not, they do not encourage you to go home at night. To just stay here with her, be here, have as many people here as you want. It was really quite open in that way. There are other possible things like midwives or certified nurses or a douala. The word freaks me out. It just doesn't feel like something I want to use to help me give a baby. But doualas, which can help with positioning, because sometimes, in most cultures around the world, the most natural position for childbirth, in fact, is a woman squatting down. Out it comes. Take advantage of gravity, and in our modern environment, we put a woman up in the stirrups, and it's in some ways counterintuitive. Why not let gravity help you? Well, a douala is a person who is trained to understand how the body actually works and how babies fit through and everything else. I've seen videos of people giving birth in water and stuff. That's not something you really want to see. It's kind of gross. Some people just give birth, some prepare for it. I don't know. And some fall somewhere in the middle. Prepared childbirth are classes or training that involve, teaching about breathing, teaching about relaxation. The most famous is Lamaze. Lamaze was a doctor who truly believed that women were classically conditioned to fear childbirth. They were so conditioned to fear this event called childbirth that it doesn't matter how great you made it. It doesn't matter, like we said on that last slide, the hospital set it up for comfort. It doesn't matter because you freaked the shit out. So they're never going to believe anything except pain. And according to Lamaze, there doesn't have to be pain if you do it properly. All right. I don't know the truth of this. There is some truth that some women, but then there's a lot of women that say, "Don't give me any pain medication, it'll hurt my baby." And then they get in there and they get about halfway through and they're like, "Give me the epidural." Right? And I don't blame them. Hell, I would be jumping for the epidural. I would ask for the epidural in the admissions room. 68 to 95% of all hospital-based deliveries involve some type of pain medication. Epidurals seem to be the most efficient. Epidural is actually a spinal tap where they inject a needle into the fluid of the spinal cord and put the pain medication straight in. So you have to have first a spinal tap and insert. It's like getting an IV or something that they can then change medicine. They basically put an IV, except it's not an IV, right? It would be an I don't know, back. And so they stick it up there. Obviously, in recent years, partners have taken a much more active role in the birthing process. I see these movies. There's dad out in the waiting room smoking cigars, and dad's job is to go out and buy cigars. And I'm sorry, I was way too busy to be buying any cigars. Okay, help my wife remain comfortable. Sometimes we walked around, change positions, things like that. Yes, it was definitely my job to tell her to calm down. She didn't like to hear it, but that's what we had to do. Encouragement, you can do it, honey. Yeah, I got my pom-poms and stuff. And then assist with the birth, cut the umbilical cord. No, hands off, dude. I ain't touching that one. That is nasty. There's a reason I paid for the doctor, and that's it, okay? Yes, hell no. That is just more than I can handle. I could not do that. When a baby's born, they should be born with their head down, and that makes a lot of sense. Because the baby's head, by the way, it's kind of creepy, but the bones in the head haven't fused together yet, so they can kind of cone up and get smaller. And when babies are born, sometimes they actually come out with a cone head. It's kind of funky. Usually the cone heads disappear as the babies get a little older. Okay. But sometimes there can be a malpresentation where the baby's feet come first, and that would obviously be a problem because if the feet are coming out first, the baby could do the splits on the way out and it ain't fit, or the baby could be sideways. Okay, you can sometimes detect this by ultrasound or even by feeling. The doctor will feel your stomach, or the nurses even will feel your stomach to detect where different parts of the baby are. Sometimes babies change position themselves. Physicians can physically turn the fetus, but if you're born in a malpresentation, it can lead to death because there's just too much bleeding. I mean, there's too much tearing. It's just there's not enough space. Okay. A C-section is possible to prevent danger to the baby and to the mother. Okay. Fetal distress. The moment they put my wife into the hospital, they popped on all these different monitors, and they were boom, boom, and measuring the heart rate and stuff like that. And what they're doing is they're checking for changes in the heartbeat, which would indicate sort of like a panic or something by the infant. Usually the the problems that can get detected would be a lack of oxygen or other changes in the heart rate or something, or the respiration. And again, anoxia would be like, say, when a baby is born, the umbilical cord can get wrapped around its neck, and that can lead to permanent brain damage and mental retardation. And so an emergency C-section can be done to reduce the risk. So during the whole process of the whole birthing process, no food allowed for the mama. All she's allowed to have is ice chips. No food, no other drink. Why is it? And the reason is quite simple, and it's because they have no idea who will or will not have to have an emergency C-section. And if you're going to have an emergency C-section where you got to cut into somebody's guts, the last thing you want to do is have it filled with all kinds of things that can cause infection. So they want to avoid the food and beverages, non-water beverages, so that you reduce the risk of infection in the case of surgeries, unplanned surgeries. So the baby comes out, and then they have to examine it. They check the breathing and the heart rate immediately. They throw silver nitrate on the eyes to protect against infection. They come out still all gooey. I've got my baby's first picture. They took in fact, it was a Kodak. They took a Kodak image at the hospital. It is not a scrapbook image, okay? Well, then they give the baby an APGAR test, often referred to as a baby IQ test. It's given at, 1 minute and 5 minutes after birth. APGAR test was named after a guy named APGAR, right? There you go. And the infant is given on 5 different dimensions: heart rate, respiration, muscle tone, color and reflex, irritability. Okay? And so a 0 is a score bad, and 2 is a score healthy and good and strong. And so a baby can score between 0 and 10. 10 would be a top score. A 10 would be an Olympic athlete or something, right? And a 0 would be not cool at all. And so what would basically happen is as a fact, what happens is these APGAR scores, as simple as it is, predict a lot of different things later on. In particular, at the hospital there, children whose APGAR scores, babies that are born with low APGAR scores, I don't remember what low is, but I want to say 4 or below is considered problematic. And children with low APGAR scores ought to be put into the ICU or the NICU, I guess, whatever, NICU or something, so that they can be monitored, right? Closely monitored, because again, it's correlation, but they're much more likely to have problems. But the crazy thing is about them APGAR scores, they have actually correlated APGAR scores with later scores such as SAT scores for admission into college, and yeah, they're related to each other. Children with high APGAR scores have higher SAT scores going to college. So there's a real truth to this APGAR test. You don't want to label a baby at birth. You don't want to give them this label, a negative label, but you need to be able to predict which kids are going to have problems so that you can put your resources into those kids that are much more likely to. That's not to say that a kid with an APGAR score of 10 wouldn't have a problem. They might, but they're much, 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 much less likely. And that's not saying the kid with a low APGAR test is going to have problems. Prematurity. Less than 1% of babies are born earlier than 28 weeks, yet they account for half of all infant deaths. So clearly prematurity is a big problem. We talked about low birth weight. Very low birth weight is just a different term. Remember the average weight was 7.5 pounds. Low birth weight was 5.5 pounds. Very low birth weight is 3.5 pounds. Serious problems, correlations with serious problems. Small for gestational age, this is another term. A baby born below the 10th percentile. One of the risks, increased infant mortality, is problems with circulation, respiration, attention, academic scores, etc. Infant mortality, Deaths that occur between birth and 1 year of age. Some countries have higher infant mortalities, though I strongly suspect if we added some of the sub-Saharan African countries, this number would be through the roof. But infant mortality is related to poor prenatal care. If the baby had problems before it was born, that is to say, if there was poor prenatal care, chances are that kid comes out with a low APGAR score, which, as we said, predicts problems. Teenage pregnancies pregnancies where poor nutrition was involved, one with risky and healthy behaviors, or in fact, even infants that are, even poor or absent postnatal care can lead to these problems. But how about this transition to parenthood? Parenthood is a big deal. I'm going to spend an awful lot of time, and there's going to be some truth of it. We're going to talk about child development, and we're going to talk about the beauty and the wonderful things in children, and then we're going to talk about it. We're going to say, becoming a father was was the biggest change in my life ever. There is nothing that has changed me more than this. And it's not always positive, okay? It doesn't always bring out the best in you. Okay. Now, let's say, for example, a lot of times when couples are on the verge of divorcing, they think if we have a child, it's going to bring us closer together. And there are going to be moments where a child brings you closer together, but more often than not, that child's going to drive the living shit out of you. It's going to just drive you apart. Because once that baby comes into your life, now they're awesome, don't get me wrong, they're awesome, but they're going to take everything that you ever owned in your life, including your freedom and your sanity, and take it from you and give you nothing back but pain. All right, I'm being a little bitter. That's not totally true. We'll come back to it, but suffice it to say, the transition to parenthood is the biggest change you will ever have in your life. Everything about you will change. Everything. At that moment, for that transition, you know what? A fast car went from being cool to idiotic. Bang. One shot. Okay? New parents must adjust their self-perceptions. Yeah, who am I? We're going to talk about self as we develop. Incorporate parental dimension into the self-concept. Yeah, I just said that. Develop realistic expectations. Yeah, you've got a lot more responsibilities in your life. Okay? But you also have to consider the fact that some babies are just harder to work with. At the same time, if you've already got one kid, bing, my first kid. And along comes a second kid, bing. Here's the fact, the second kid, let's say you've got 2 video games, the old one and the brand new one. Which one do you want to play with? Yeah, but unfortunately, unlike in this example with your video games, the old video game gets jealous. Oh yeah, okay, gets jealous and realizes that you're not playing it anymore. So siblings often have a difficult time adjusting because of the way that many people have babies. When a second child or third or fourth, whatever, child is born, the previous one, the one just before it, is almost very often is around the stage of potty training. So a very, very, very common thing is that potty training, which you are working so hard on. Oh, we will get to potty training. It just goes out the window. It's just trashed. The kids get all, sometimes they get bitter, sometimes they get resentful, sometimes they lash out, all kinds of different things, all kinds of different problems, and I think that I got pretty lucky. They get along well. They always have gotten along pretty well. There's issues, trust me. Oh my God, there's issues. But they get along pretty well, and that's a pretty good image, okay? So it changes the entire family. All right. In the next chapter, we're going to continue to talk about physical development throughout childhood because kids do change, right? My 13-year-old is now going, so they change. We're going to talk about the physical development throughout the stages of childhood in the next chapter.